last one that we have for today is entitled Fighting Polarization at the Workplace, what this study on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict tells us about legitimizing others' narratives. And this study kind of focuses around this term called sense of national coherence, which is defined as an enduring tendency to perceive one's national group as comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful. And so kind of the purpose of the study was to see this role of SONC, of sense of national coherence, as a mediator between levels of conservativeness as measured by voting behavior and religious grouping, and the tendency to delegitimize the others' collective narratives in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so the researchers hypothesized with the study was that the sense of national coherence will be negatively related to legitimizing the others' collective narratives. And the methods that they used here was that the sense of national coherence was understood as having a dual role as a resilience concept and as a potential obstacle for peace process in conflict areas. The research participants included 528 Israeli Jewish adults, almost half males, and 46% identified as secular, 17.5 as traditional, 16 as religious, and 10 as ultra-Orthodox. And the survey instruments that they used included a sense of national coherence questionnaire, perceptions of collective narratives, voting behavior, and religious grouping. And what they found here is that there's a significant difference between the independent variables, voting behavior, and religious grouping. That the significant differences in sense of national coherence levels were found between voting categories. Right-wing voters reported significantly higher sense of national coherence than center party voters, and the latter reported significantly higher sense of national coherence than left-wing voters. And so their hypothesis regarding regarding high sense of national coherence and legitimizing others' narratives was also supported here. And Anna Priya related this to the workplace in three different ways. One, reducing polarization, that these ideological divisions can be pretty common, but it's up to the workplace, its culture and management to oversee how these differences are tackled. There's a regard for others' narratives. It can be healthy for management as a company culture to consciously work on building a culture of dialogue so that employees can interact, communicate, and have regard for the point of view of the multiple departments and teams of the company. But a norm must be built over time to facilitate inclusivity in conversations across teams and cultural differences. And then finally, she had this point on workplace sense of national coherence, talking about how a workplace's sense of coherence, if it's high in terms of its identity as the company itself, belief in its product services, it can be positive for a point of unity. But organizations have to be careful for this to not delegitimize the narrative, experience, and work of other organizations. And this can be true if the workplace seeks to build a monopoly or sabotage efforts of other companies, which can happen in highly competitive environments.
I think this kind of like speaks to the threshold of like what the healthy balance is between creating a strong in-group identity, but also staying flexible to hear narratives from outgroups, you know, like that. Like I think there's a lot of benefit to having a strong in-group identity, especially in an organization, like a team identity, organizational identity, but not so much to the detriment of being flexible from new ideas from the outside and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it too. That it's kind of finding balance between that, because you can find belonging, connectedness, and all those good things from that in-group identity. But if you're too attached to it in a way that you're not open to other ideas, other people,
right,
other groups, it can be detrimental to both of you.
Especially as you start to grow and you bring new people in, maybe with new perspectives or different backgrounds and stuff like that, it might be very hard to, you know, assimilate those people or to like include them in things if you've got such a strong identity around your organization and new folks are coming in. There's some threshold there between like strong culture and identity, but also flexible, you know, and open-minded.
This is I would love to see their advice on how to build this, an eternal question, right? And how to operationalize it. I'm literally going through this right now with a company that acquired 3 other companies And one of the senior managers at one of the acquired companies is asking me, how do I carry over the lead company's culture into my culture, but still keep our own climate?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd love to see how they actually make this work.
Yeah, I think this speaks to also just the work that we do and like how we view conflict. We're not viewing conflict as a good or a bad thing like everyone else is, and we're trying to kind of break the frames and be more creative in all of our approaches. We're trying to speak that way to our clients and our customers. So, you know, Jeremy, just kind of piggybacking off what you're saying, like finding that balance, how everything has to be, like we can't be too stuck in any framework or any frame that either society has put on us or that we put on ourselves or our company has put on us. You know, it's we kind of, but how do we find that balance, right? That balance of not being so strict, but not being too lenient and too flexible. I think it mentioned inclusivity in here. Like that's like the term that is being, you know, forefront in my mind right now. It's just like, even with Terrell, what you're saying, okay, everyone has to just come to the table. That's the first thing that I would think of is, well, what does everyone want? And then from there, then you decide. That's the hard part though, is getting everyone to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, you think of an organizational culture, it's like the big thing. And so it almost needs to be primary, but the way to make it optimal is if all the smaller parts of it, meaning all the team members and then all the groups and teams within the organization are also maximized and feel included. And so, you know, it's just maybe making the overall organizational culture big enough to really include all of the smaller components.
So like
to bring them their best selves to the table.
So you mean like not like the organization has some overarching cultural structure, but it's not super rigid, so that each team or each department can also have their own cultures. I've seen that before, where teams have, like, each department can construct their own culture, as long as it doesn't like go against the broader sort of structure of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's kind of like how the US is set up, right? It's like, or it's supposed to be set up. It's like there's a constitution, and states can have their own laws and cities can have their own ordinances and all that stuff. As long as it doesn't go against the constitution, you can kind of be flexible within that. I mean, that's kind of the way it's supposed to be. So that's anybody ever watch Silicon Valley? You never, oh my God, such a good show. So it's really funny, but it's a good show, especially if you work in tech and Silicon Valley. It's just funny. Anyway, there was this one, I remember, this reminds me of this one scenario there, where it was like the company acquired these two other companies, so they became this big company, and there was this one issue, and it was like whether they would allow like one of the companies, like, they allowed dogs to come to work with people, and the other company didn't. And so they merged all these three companies, and they started bringing dogs, and the other company was like super up in arms about, like, we have allergies here, we don't want dogs here, and the other one's like, having dog, and the dogs started running rampant and all kinds of stuff, and it became this big conflict. It reminds me, this is like a very simple way of looking at, well, this company had this culture, this company had a different culture, you're bringing them together, what do you do? How do you get them to?
So yeah, one of the things I said to this person was, continue with your culture as it is, but ensure that you try to mesh it with the broader company's values. Is what I told him, to conceptualize it that way. And also, I used something very similar to what you just said, except I used food, where I said, we're all part of the US. The hamburger is something that we all share, but you go to different places and it's cooked different ways. Or barbecue sauce. Barbecue sauce is a big one. You know, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, all these different places, barbecue sauce has to go on the meat, but it's different types of barbecue sauce. It's kind of out there, but it's really accessible.
Yeah. So you have this, like, we all do this thing, but it's got a different flavor for each department, or each team has a different flavor, and you can have different components for that. But this is what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. This also reminds me just of my previous work working with refugees coming over into this country, having to learn a whole new culture, but not completely ostracize their culture of origin. So we would be sure to, like, in trainings and workshops and groups, it was always, rather than talking about assimilating, don't assimilate into American culture, but acculturate and try to learn a little bit about our culture, but don't forget to still practice your own and find your own creative way of, like, meshing the two together. Immigrants and refugees have been doing that in our country as long as it's existed. So I think that our organizations can too.
Yeah. Well, that's supposed to be the beautiful part about what I think the American dream is. We have a certain set of, constitutional values, but really it's supposed to be a place where people can come in and bring their own flavors, and America grows and evolves and changes with all these different flavors. That's what the dream is.
Yeah.
When you talk about, say, 3 companies, the Silicon Valley example, coming together, I think the thing is you have to give them a common, I think assimilation often gets a bad rap, because I think you have to give them a common goal. And, regardless of how one may feel politically, if you're a pacifist about the United States military, I will say, being a veteran, one thing that the military, in my opinion, my humble opinion, leads all other organizations in, is you can take a redneck from backwoods Louisiana and you can take the hardest Afro-Latino from Harlem, and you get those two to work together. You drop them off, and again, regardless of how you feel about us being in Afghanistan or Somalia, you drop them off there, and those two are completely dedicated to this new culture. They speak the same lingo. They walk, talk, act. They are focused, and they are united, much more united oftentimes than, and they don't lose their culture. When they go on leave, they go back to Harlem, they go back to Louisiana, and they are still who they were and always were. But you put them together and you've created, I think it's a beautiful thing, because you've taken 2 completely dissimilar cultures and you created something brand new.
Yeah. What that does is that it does so many things, because it gives them a superordinate identity. Like, we're both part of the same team now. It gives them that shared purpose and that shared goal. It gives them a lot of interdependence. I'm going to depend on you. You're going to depend on me for our lives. Like, that's like really high interdependence. I think like all those things could be great lessons for people in workplaces. Shared goals, superordinate identity, interdependence.
Yeah, I think the shared goal is I think the key.
Yeah. Well, is it also, would you say that it's also a shared risk? I mean, especially in that kind of environment where it's like we're sharing, there's a lot of risk here, and we're both under that threat of risk.
Right.
And that's very it's very, bonding.
Right. It's about, I think Ben Franklin and then MLK use the same quote: "We must work together, or we will most assuredly hang together." Something be hung together, something of that nature. Yeah. So I guess if you have 3 companies merging into one, they have to figure out a way to make it work, or they're all going to be out of work.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like how do you motivate people to work together really well and like become part of the same identity? It's like you give them that goal, you give them that like the shared reward, but you also make salient the shared risk of not working together well. Like if we don't get together, guys, if we all don't work together well, here's what's at risk. And if we do work together well, here's what we're going to get. And both of those things are pretty present.
I know. I often think of everything like it's simple, but it's not. So like the human body has different systems. We have different organs, and they're all inside the body. And everything needs to work well for the body to be able to function the way it's supposed to function. And if one system is not working well, it's a drain on all the others.
Mm-hmm.
And so while they do different things, they have different functions, they all have their own independent goals that are vitally necessary, but they all must be working well within the body for the body to function the way it's supposed to function. And I think of, from the human body, then it goes to, a relationship between 2 people. It's the same thing, okay? So it's a couple, and you each bring your own things in, but in order to function well as a couple, then everyone has to bring their best selves. And so then it's a family. It's within a family unit, the same thing. We're one family, we're one unit, but now it has 3 components or 4 components. And each needs to be safe and free and have everything it needs in order to bring its best self. And then from a family unit, then you've got maybe a neighborhood or maybe a church or your work organization. And so that each component needs to have what it needs in order to be its best self. And so an organization, a workplace organization, I see it as exactly the same. The smallest component, which is the team member, has got to be able to bring their best selves to the table, to the work environment, so that it can produce, so that then the team can produce optimally. And then when the team produces optimally, then the department does. And when the department does, the organization does. But now, how to do that, and to do it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think you're hit. I think
empower people to do that. That's our challenge.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep going because I know we have to hop off. But Chris hit on something that drives what Tony's saying. I've been thinking about this for a while. There are 2 sides to it, similar to what Jeremy interjected. I noticed that when there are, I'm going to call them micro traumas that people experience collectively, they come together. So you think about those shirts that say, I survived everybody who survived a thing, automatically you're together because you have that common experience. And so I was thinking about also that the positive side of it, the positive production of something. And Chris, I wrote you a note, but I would love to see us have a conscripted gap year where we take these kids from Harlem and Beverly Hills and wherever else, put them together, and their job is to build a schoolhouse in Appalachia. They're forced to you're taking that military concept, but taking like Jeremy was saying, the risk out of it, taking the collective risk out of it and putting a collective production into it. So this is something it's a really, really big thing I've been thinking about, but that idea being well, first of all, it's conscripted. So you're forced, you're there, but it's not that you're forced because of who you are. You're forced because everybody, let's go back to Noah's previous study of national identity. I'm sorry, I'm bringing all this stuff in, but this is something I've been thinking about for a few years actually, but it's just been on the back burner.
That's so, the positive intergroup interaction is so important. It's it'd be such a great thing. Yeah, I really like the analogy of the human body, because there's 2 parts, and it's the same with these organizations. There's 2 parts to this whole thing. Each part independently needs to work really well on its own, but then then they also all need to communicate really well with each other. And those both need to be happening, for the whole system to work. So like, so I think, if we follow that model, it's like, okay, so how do we help people at an individual level feel good and engaged and satisfied and healthy at work? And how do we make sure they're communicating well with each other? Like, if we can help with that, I think we've done some good work. Self-care and communication.
Mm-hmm. Unless we just want to go straight Star Trek and the Borg, where all one mind, one goal, one everything.
Ooh, that'd be interesting. It kind of happens naturally with the groupthink. It's like we start like we have like a hive mind. But maybe we should do that. Maybe we should start plugging into each other's brains. Oh, it might be a good way of perspective taking.
I know. My favorite line, which I use it often, is resistance is futile. That's what I tell my kids.
I love it.
I was thinking in terms of like there's a couple I feel like classic studies that go over this kind of stuff. Like there's I don't know if you guys know like the robbers cave experiment, something like that, which is it's all about positive intergroup contact, where they have two sets of boys in a camp working against each other, and then they suddenly have to work to help like get a car out of a ditch or something, and they like immediately bond together after being so super competitive and all that. And so that could be, maybe we could go through some classic studies sometime and just,
that's actually a great idea. Maybe we should do that, because Sharif and Sharif, which is the Robbers Cave study, that's like the sort of classic baseline intergroup contact, paper that everything has been built on. That'd be actually really good to do some classics, to do some like sort of theoretical seminal work.
I wonder if my grad school, SIT Graduate Institute, the School for International Training, they have a youth program that's been going on for like well over 10 years, and they do it's hosted in the US, but and then they have some like Latin American programs as well, but they bring youth from high conflict zones, like Israeli and Palestinian youth, to the Vermont campus and engage in like a month-long sort of summer camp, but really working through conflict, everything that we're talking about. And they did it with Turkish and Greek Cypriots and Northern Ireland, so they've been doing a lot of these studies with youth, with young people, but that definitely adheres to kind of what we're talking about, this positive group identity. Like you take people from polar opposite ends of war in some cases, different sides, and then bringing them together and creating a whole new dynamic. I wonder if they have, I'll look into it, and Noah, if you want to check that out to see if there's any, if they've gauged, the effectiveness of their programs and things like that.
Sean Dunning has done some field work with this kind of thing. I think he's done like, I don't know if it was Israeli-Palestinian, but like something like that, where like he's done these like walks with I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was with his last company.
He's done Israeli-Palestinian.
Oh, okay, yeah, he might be interesting to hear what he's done. And